Hey everybody. So I have Teresa back on the channel. I have my son joining me today because it is spring break.
Bye.
We might get into no, we're saying hello. We're not saying bye-bye. I'm keeping his face out of the video though. But Teresa, I want to have you back on the channel to talk a little bit more about stress gut connection
Yes,
and how stress plays such a vital role in not only creating gut issues, but also preventing us from healing from gut issues. So, what is your understanding as to you know, what are sort of the specific details as to how stress might impact our gut health and keep us sick, keep us from preventing us from recovering our gut health?
definitely. So, I mean, what I like to start with is always we think about, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and kind of in layman's terms, right? We usually refer to that as we're either in fight or flight or we're in rest and digest. And really what that comes down to is this very basic understanding of when we are in sympathetic activation and that adrenaline's kicking in and we're in survival mode, we take all of our resources and energy away from what our body deems to not be a vital process at that time, which means that we're not sending the energy we need for our digestion. And that's when we shift into parasympathetic. A lot of times we have reactions like our stomach gurgles or we're yawning, or we call that rest and digest mode because that's when our body signals, okay, we are safe. Let's divert all of our energy back to where it needs to go for these kind of secondary processes like digestion and sleep and things that we can only do when we're in a restful state. So even just those layman's terms we use all the time of, are you in rest or digest, or are you in fight or flight, it comes down to digestion in a lot of ways, right?
Okay. So one thing that really spoke to me before is you talked about the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, and most animals in the animal kingdom will flee from perceived danger. And humans, with our modern day stressors like being at the office or, fighting with their wife or husband or whatever, we will freeze. And there's really no way for us to release that trauma. So, do you have any suggestions for that in terms of being able to release these stressors and trauma? How do we deal with them? How do we get away from that and enter into the parasympathetic state?
Definitely. So I really like to look at sympathetic and parasympathetic along a continuum. And Babette Rothschild and Deb Dana, they really talk a lot about with polyvagal theory. It's more of a continuum, not like an on or off switch. So we don't want to kind of oversimplify that. So when I look at the continuum idea, I like to think some people need more of an upregulation and some people need more of a downregulation. And for some people who get stuck in this acute stress response and they're feeling very like almost like they're hot wired, right? And like they're on a high tension wire and they have a lot of adrenaline built up and a lot of stress. Sometimes they need to do an activity that allows them to dispel that adrenaline to then be able to downregulate. Whereas I think some people then need activities that are just more going to help them shift into a calming state. So I think, again, it kind of is different for every person because everyone's nervous system is primed differently. And I think people who've been stuck in that traumatic or chronic stress response for a very long time can get more stuck in that frozen, fearful state where they actually need a little more activation sometimes. And then people who are stuck in that high stress response might need to dispel that adrenaline in a different way. I think it's similar to where they've done those studies on, why do some people react different to dopamine issues? And some people need to go on like a dopamine fast and they do better with just like simplifying their life. Whereas some people are able to counterbalance that excess dopamine with like adrenaline seeking activities. And I think it just comes back to we're all wired a little bit differently, or we all have different needs based on our experiences. So that's my overcomplicated way of saying, I think we have to experiment a little bit with the routines and the habits each day and see what feels like it brings us some regulation. So, for example, if someone's like, the way that my chronic stress or trauma shows up is it's really hard to get out of bed and get going, and I feel like I just am very heavy and I have this tired energy, then I would try to recommend what are some things that we can put into place that are more activating. And we could start really simple with, maybe I wouldn't do a deep diaphragmatic breath work practice with that person, which is going to shift them deeper into parasympathetic. But maybe we would do something from the yogic tradition, like breath of joy or breath of fire, something that brings more vitality and energy into their sense of being that day. Or the goal might be working on getting up and going for a quick walk around their house, or just, outside in their yard, things that are going to bring some activation. Whereas someone who feels like, I'm like literally shaking and I have this sense of like, I need to dispel the energy. It's like, okay, do you have the ability to do something a little more activating, releasing some of that energy, like doing some jumping jacks, or, like doing something that gives you that release, doing some tension and relaxation of your muscles. Or does someone feel like it's a lot easier for them to do a gentle yoga or a Tai Chi approach? And I come from a somatics world in my therapy, so I really like getting the body involved. We could also think about this in terms of meditation, visualization, things like that. But some people are going to feel that they are able to shift up or down that continuum better with different activities in place. But I do think most of it comes back to the somatics in the body, because we are going to see more of a shift in that amygdala and that threat perception when we're involving our body, because that's the quickest way to kind of hijack those neurochemicals. I like the concept of the self-talk, but that takes a lot longer to build up into a way that we're shifting those neurotransmitters. Bringing the physicality in, I think, is going to be a quicker way to achieve that.
So yeah, I mean, so doing hacks like breathing, calming the nervous system down through visualizations and stuff like that, are sort of more quick acting parasympathetic changes. Whereas, doing the actual neuro retraining and sort of pruning away those negative neural pathways and replacing them with productive ones towards healing could take a lot more time. So, but we need something in the meantime. So you think that those, like, sort of having a crutch with, and one thing that's, I think, is really overlooked is just finding joy in your life, just doing things that people find joyful. Because I think when you're in this state, people are always researching their health. They're on YouTube all day, and trust me, I'm one of them, right? Who's always looking at videos and reading books about health and talking about symptoms, and you start living in this snowball broken tape recorder loop of being that sick person. It's almost impossible to get out of that. Do you see that a lot, where it's like, if people just start faking till they make it? That might sound too, I know people might get a little bit pissed off with me saying that, but what can we do in our daily lives just to break that cycle, and not just talking about like visualizations and stuff, but do you have any other suggestions as to how we just stop, researching and all that crap, and just start living a more normal life with some joy in it again?
Definitely. Yeah. And the core tenets of like how I approach the work comes from my training as a licensed mental health counselor with cognitive behavior therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. And a lot of what you see in most of the brain retraining programs have pulled from those traditions, right? And I think that phrase "fake it till you make it" is used a lot in the CBT world, where we're talking about behavioral activation, where you have to sometimes put the behaviors and the structure in place first before you see a shift in thought patterns and emotional and mood patterns. And there's actually been some studies done on why mental health hospitalizations help people with severe depression. It's not always the medication that's given during that time. It's you're taking someone who maybe is severely depressed and putting them in a structured environment that has activities and socialization, and you're on a set routine. And a lot of times that is creating more of a change than a medication. And I think it's true with anything in the chronic health community, is again moving away from the negativity bias and, like you said, that negative spiral where these chronic illness support groups and the symptom checking, you're just hardwiring those neural pathways that say that you are sick and that's all you have to do and that's all that your life revolves around, right? So when we think about where are our values, what is our purpose in life, and then we start to come up with our list of what's important to me and how do I structure my life around what's valuable to me and what do I want my life to look like, rather than what am I stuck with or what do I think I'm stuck with. And that comes into that acceptance and commitment therapy principle as well. So there's a lot of evidence behind it, right? These are really, I always like to come back to what's evidence-based in my practices and then kind of build from there. So these modalities have been around for decades, but we can now kind of apply them into the brain retraining space.
You know, one thing that I think is my biggest pet peeve in all this, and I'm not faulting people for following it because I was trapped in that cycle for years and years of chasing the next supplement, chasing the next diet, chasing this or that. It just, I find it very frustrating that every practitioner always addresses supplements or protocols or whatever, and they never, ever address stress. As it almost seems too simple, but also because it's not really something you can make money off of.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to, manage your stress. Well, how am I going to make money on that, right? So I find it very frustrating. But aside from that, I wouldn't mind just like pick your brain a little bit outside of the brain retraining space. Like, what are other things that people could do just outside of, visualizations and affirmations and gratitude and joy and that kind of stuff? Are there supplements that you recommend? Are there other areas to look at that could really induce a lot of healing for people? Like, what do you have any suggestions in that realm?
Definitely. Yeah. So I'm a trained herbalist too. I definitely think herbs have a place, but I like to look at herbs more as how are we filling in the gaps in our healing, perhaps, right? So when I'm looking at the kind of herbs that I take, my herbalism business is based on like herbal teas. I think it's like a nice, gentle segue into habit stacking and allowing like the plant world into our lives in a very benign and supportive way, not like here's 15 vials of pills you have to take every day, right? So, for example, if I'm noticing that my nervous system is activated, I have trouble sleeping, I'm going to make a blend of herbs that are just traditional nervine herbs, right? Like maybe chamomile and skullcap and valerian and things that are going to help with sleep, but in a very supportive way. A tea is very benign. It's just enough of a dose that's going to make you feel supported and calm, right? So something like that, I think herbs can have a place, but I don't think we should be relying on them and treating them the way we do in Western medicine as a cure or a medicine for things. I think herbs are here to support us, but when we start to try to replace Western medicine with Eastern medicine, it doesn't make sense because the whole purpose of holistic medicine and these traditional things is that our body is like an ecosystem. It's like a garden. And how do we nourish ourselves that we can heal ourselves? Like herbal medicine was never intended to be like, here's a whole bunch of bottles of pills, take them like a medicine, right? So that's where I think there's a distinction that we have to make there. I'm also very much into somatics work. And so I think anything we can do with our bodies to enact movement and a sense of strengthening and endurance and safety from that somatics perspective. And that can start really simple with breath work and then work its way up even just to like stretching and moving in new ways and also incorporating nature. I think nature is really important. The sunshine, the fresh air, the clean water, a lot of the stuff that people don't have access to living in a city, like finding ways to incorporate that. We're not going to fully heal if we lose sight of what our natural state is supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think often I've found with my own treatment, it's the sort of the free natural stuff that, you don't need to pay for are the best healers. Like the sun is overlooked, turning off your screen, getting, like you said, just getting out in nature, being around plants. I mean, and this isn't just, again, kind of like, as you said, woo woo kind of science. I mean, there's a lot of studies out there showing that when people are out in nature, they feel a percentage wise more calm or whatever. So getting back to the brain retraining stuff. So Teresa, you have joined on with our community. So you are doing a session a week with our limbic system community, or gut brain community is what we are sort of calling it, because we're really working on healing the gut and brain axis, and improving your life in so many different ways. But you also have a course that's come out as well, for I guess different modalities for rewiring your brain in that realm.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to that as well?
Sure. Yes. So my program is called Psyche, Soma, Soul. And what I was hoping to do is take traditional brain retraining as we know it, but add in the holistic components. And so I bring a lot of my background with licensed mental health counseling and evidence-based practices to make sure we have a really solid foundation in why this stuff works, and not, like you said, getting pulled too much into just, oh, I heard this. Like, I really want to bring it back to the research, but also bringing in the holistic side of things, right? So in our course, we're touching on yoga therapy and ancient yoga techniques to talk about the energetics and the work around how our energy systems also determine our healing. We talk about spirituality and whether or not, the placebo effect, even if that's what makes a lot of this energy work effective, we actually talk about the placebo effect being a really good thing and one of the most under researched but important parts of healing potentially. So again, we're kind of jumping into that woo-woo space that someone might say, okay, you're talking about yoga therapy, but we're bringing it back to research, and we're saying even in the studies that are done, we can't negate the fact that this placebo group oftentimes outperforms the pharmaceutical group. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for this body of research? And so I really wanted to find a way to blend the holistic side and the evidence-based side, and to give people a little bit of a way to explore all of these different healing modalities and then pick the plan that works best for them. So we really talk about habit stacking, creating a healing routine using the brain retraining principles that we've established. And then we have an entire healing library that you get to choose, like, well, what modalities should I try today, and see if they work for me.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great course for people who are looking at um just even just sort of getting into any sort of brain retraining exercises, really diving into, again, the gut brain connection and trying to heal their gut health. I think it's such an overlooked healing modality for healing gut health, and I'm just very passionate about spreading this word out, because it's really something no one talks about. But we are seeing a little bit of a growth in the space in terms of, I think anyway, a little bit of headway, people starting to realize that, when you have a gut injury, you're going to have a brain injury. When you have a brain injury, you're going to have a gut injury. And the two have to be worked on in conjunction with each other most of the time. Anyway.
Yes.
All right, Teresa. Well, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you part of our community. I'm going to link that down below. I'm also going to link your website down below where you guys could find her course. Please, for the love of God, guys, just follow her YouTube channel. Her YouTube channel is amazing. That's how I discovered Teresa. And if you guys are really looking at rewiring your brain, she has so much good information on there. So highly recommend checking that out and subscribing. So thanks so much, Teresa. Thank you guys for watching, and talk to you in the next one.